Good morning or good afternoon to all Independence staff. I'm going to start off the presentation discussing 504 accommodation plans and all you need to know. Basically, the most important thing for you to keep in mind in regards to a 504 accommodation plan is that it is a federal civil rights law. It was put into place to protect students that have disabilities, and it is implemented nationwide as well by CMS schools. The 504 plan is pretty simple, not on the counselor's end, but on the teacher's end. We do a lot of the legwork behind the scenes, and when it gets to you, it's just implementation and making sure that you follow everything properly. Students don't just necessarily get a 504 plan because they have a disability or because they have an illness. They have to provide proper documentation from their physician, and then the 504 team approves the documentation. And if it to the team it seems like the disability substantially limits them in the classroom, that is when they do receive a 504 accommodation plan. So a lot of teachers or staff are misinformed about how a student gets a 504 plan. It's not just simply because they have asthma or they have diabetes. It has to prove that it limits them in some sort of way to their education. It is reviewed each year, and it can be revised at any time if the student feels like they no longer need the accommodation or modification. So it is a breathing and living document. Tips for success. Make sure that you follow the plan to a T. Read everything very carefully. They redo the plan and the form each year. As you all know, it is no longer stored in PowerSchool, and therefore we're back to paper copies. So you need to make sure that you keep them in a safe place and you read everything carefully and you follow everything carefully because it is a legal document. If a student refuses to use an accommodation or modification, there is a form that they must fill out and that you turn in to the school counselor. At the end of each quarter for your class, there's a progress monitoring form as well for you to say how often they're using their modifications or accommodations, if you felt like they were helpful or needed, and you would turn that in to the counselor as well at the end of each quarter for each of your students that have a 504 accommodation plan. You did receive an email containing the above documents, and if you have any questions or concerns about the process, just see us and we'll be glad to help you.
Good afternoon. This is Ms. Williamson. Today I am going to introduce you to the Independence Intervention Team. The objectives for this training is to define school-based intervention Tier 3 teams, identify key intervention team Tier 3 teams, provide overview of the intervention process, and explain teacher responsibilities. What is an intervention team, Tier 3 team? It is a multidisciplinary problem-solving team that addresses the needs of students who are most at risk of failure. The intervention team addresses academic, behavioral, speech, language, and social emotional concerns. The intervention team targets interventions in order to help the student perform successfully in the general education environment. Our school-based team consists of the following members. Mr. Simmons is our IT administrator. I am the IT facilitator. Ms. Michelle Cleveland is the psychologist. We do not have an academic facilitator. We do need some teachers to be involved. The counselors, all the counselors are part of the intervention team. We do not have a parent, guardian representative. Our social worker, Ms. Bennett, is part of the intervention team, and the EC department chair, Ms. Dyson, is part of the intervention team. The intervention team process at the Tier 3 level. This is the goal of the intervention team is once we finally do accept the actual referral, we provide scientifically research-based individualized interventions of high intensity for students who have shown minimum response to previous interventions at the Tier 2 and Tier 1 levels. Key terms. The key terms are targeted skill interventions, baseline data, and progress monitoring. The targeted skill interventions, this will be the intervention that will be used in the classroom at the Tier 2 level. Teacher responsibilities. Prior to making an actual referral to the intervention team, interventions must be implemented and documented on a data collection form, which we will send to you under separate cover, for a minimum of 20 to 30 school days before referring to the intervention team. Generally, these interventions are documented on a PEP and or an individualized behavior plan. Progress monitoring data must be collected and used to make the decisions. If a student is not displaying appropriate progress with interventions in the classroom and is significantly below typical peers, refer to the intervention team should be considered. Teacher responsibilities, making an IT referral. Complete the IT referral form, which will be sent to you again under separate cover. We will send additional forms under separate cover. Complete the designated sections of focus of concern, participate in plan development during IT meetings, and the other teacher responsibility, the most important one, is to implement the assigned interventions and progress monitoring tools. They must be in place for between 20 to 30 days in the classroom. Progress monitoring, I will send an instrument for you to collect your data on a separate form. This slide here tells about key progress monitoring points. Each target skill will need to be monitored. The same progress monitoring tool should be used to determine baseline and progress data. Progress monitoring needs to be conducted weekly. A minimum of 4 progress monitoring data points are needed before the team can make a final decision. The intervention team review meeting after the interventions and progress monitoring have been implemented in the classroom. The collected forms are then sent to the counselor who represents that particular student. All IT outcome decisions must be based on data. Okay, if we do not accept your referral, it is because more than likely there was not enough data on the PEP before sent to our team. Some of the key takeaway points here. Our team is a collaborative, problem-solving team, and our purpose is to help students be successful in the general education environment. Interventions and progress monitoring must be implemented for 20 to 30 school days prior to being referred to the IT. And more intensive interventions will be implemented for at least 20 to 30 days during IT process. Interventions always involve instruction. Keep that in mind, and thank you very much.
Reporting child abuse, neglect, dependency, or death due to maltreatment. It is the law. Ms. Cora Bennett is our school social worker. Please know that all school personnel are mandatory reporters. Any person who feels or suspects that a child is being abused, neglected, dependent, or has died as a result of maltreatment shall report the case of that juvenile to the director of the Department of Social Services in the county where the child lives. So, as a teacher, if you notice that a student has bruises and or has maybe been abused in any sort of way, you are responsible to reporting that to the Department of Social Services. We as counselors, as school social workers, as school psychologists, will of course assist you in making that referral if we need to. However, the person who first suspects that the abuse is occurring is the one who is responsible for making that report. To report abuse or neglect, please call 704-336-CARE. McKinney-Vento Act. McKinney-Vento Act is an act for students who are homeless, children who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. Examples of those types of students may be students who are living with other relatives due to loss of housing, economic hardship. They may be living in a hotel, a motel, campgrounds, or trailer parks. They may be living in emergency shelters or awaiting foster care placement. Students may be eligible also if they are living in a place that is not designed for humans to live. They may be living in cars, sleeping in the park, public spaces, abandoned buildings. Migratory children who are living in any of these circumstances, or unaccompanied youth living in above circumstances. The McKinney-Vento Specialist at Independence. Your first resource is Ms. Bennett, the school social worker. Your second resource is Ms. Williamson, or you may see any other counselor on the team.